This will be my ongoing confession. Do I feel guilty? In a way, yes. Do I feel guilty the way you might feel guilty if you'd killed someone? Not yet, but that may still come. There's that, and there's the cynical notation that everyone gets caught eventually. We might be long dead of old age or revenge by the time it happens, but somebody will figure it out. I want there to be a record somewhere of what transpired. Something written as it's happening, so that you'll know it's not a story spun later to save our collective asses from the electric chair. I want you innocents to understand, in real time, how a man becomes a serial killer. It is so much harder and so much easier than you will ever comprehend. The cops have one thing right. It begins with a motive. Unless you're a nutjob, one person does not kill another person without a reason. Hell, I can't even get to the gym without a proper motivation. So, the thought of someone murdering nonsensically just seems insane. Of course, I do go to the gym, because I do have a proper motivation, and we have murdered on that same principle. In fact, it started with a question of principle. There were 3 of us, still nursing beers after everyone else had gone home. We sat in the rear of the bar commiserating over the shit jobs we would have to go back to the next morning. This confession is for me, not for our joke of a justice system. So, I'll call my table mates that night Jake and Tom. I didn't know them that well, but this was part of how all this began. Staring down at his beer, Jake asked,
"You hear about that kid who got off jail from killing people because he had affluenza or something?"
Tom nodded along with his words. "Assholes are above the law." I was fairly drunk and extremely in agreement, so I said, "Shit like this is how mob justice starts."
"Wish I could get some mob justice where I work,"
Jake muttered.
"My boss straight up steals from us, messes with the system to change our working hours. Caught him with his hand in my jacket pocket in the back room once. But there's no shit I can do about it. If I call the cops, he'll just tell them I'm a thief, and I'll go to prison. Game over, man."
Hunched low from drunkenness, Tom stared up from his beer. "Somebody should beat that guy's ass. Send him a message. Weasels like that wise up real quick." "Would be nice," I added. Jake's gaze went dangerously distant. In a low and hateful voice, he said,
"So, let's do it."
"What?" "Come on, we're not serious."
"I am. We'll do it like that movie. You guys beat up my boss, and I'll do yours."
Silence fell over the table as Tom and I stared at him. He may have been beer talking, but he looked deadly serious. After a moment, I said, "Wait, no, you think they won't figure that out? 3 random managers get beaten up, and their employees are connected."
"I don't know you."
Jake shot back, his eyes hard.
"We're not Facebook friends, and I don't fucking tweet. I've ran into you twice at random parties hosted by other people. We have no connection, at least not any they'll see."
"Did you pay with a credit card at this bar?" I asked, while Tom stared in fear at both of us.
"Not yet. I'll pay cash. You both pay cash. And let's do this."
He didn't sound overly drunk, or even mildly crazy. The more we worked through the details, the more the prospect of having my boss getting what was coming to him actually began to sound appealing. More than that, I would get a chance to assault someone else's asshole boss, take a little frustration and send a message. But we couldn't actually get away with this, could we? "Research," Tom interrupted meekly. We both looked at him and waited. He sat a little taller in his chair and spoke quietly. "We watch every episode of CSI. We Google it. On computers at the library," I interjected. "And no checking out books, no record." "Right." Tom leaned closer to us. "We don't make any decisions until we know everything there's to know about pulling off a crime like this. It has to be airtight." Jake nodded along with this, and a slow grin spread across his face.
"I knew there was a reason I liked you two. Shake on it." Research.
His voice went low.
And we'll meet at the bar down the street in 3 weeks. Friday, 8 p.m. It'll be crowded and nobody will recognize or remember us.
Flanagan's?
Tom asked.
No, the other direction.
The sports pub?
Yeah, that one.
My pulse raced to a roar in my ears. Was this actually going to happen? Maybe not, but it was at least nice to fantasize.
Friday, 8 p.m, 3 weeks from now. Shake on it,
Jake said again. And we did. You see, that's the first step towards serial murder. Co-conspirators. They can't just be anybody. You have to understand their ideologies. You have to know why they'll actually do this with you, even if you don't truly know the men themselves. No one can ever really know another human being, really, but ideologies run strong, deep, and furious. No man has ever killed another man without an ideology involved. We reminded each other to be smart, and we parted ways. I went home and almost loaded up CSI on my Netflix. I stopped myself just short. How suspicious would it be if I binge-watched all these just before my boss got beaten up with no trace forensic evidence left behind? And besides, Netflix only had the shitty spin-offs. I could watch it all at the library, but no, that would mean 100 hours sitting there. I would be remembered, and they might keep a log of traffic. How could one watch a show without leaving a record? Of course, DVDs. I went to every rundown video and DVD store in the city and paid cash for every crime-related show I could find. Then, each night after work, I got down to it. While the shows played, I wrote notes, and trips to different libraries later filled me in on what was real and what was bullshit. Turns out, most of those shows are a crock, but they gave me the right keywords, and my research began in earnest. Most of all, I found a Reddit thread where someone, for the sake of argument, detailed everything needed to get away with murder in a tremendously long post that received multiple golds. We only intended a beating, but the advice still applied. I learned quite a bit from that spiel. It turned out that the solve rate for most crimes was still abysmal, and that police were more concerned with robbing and the citizenry these days than catching gangbangers. Our intended targets weren't poor, so there would be an investigation, but it would be easy enough to make the case a difficult one. Difficult cases were often quickly abandoned. We just had to make sure to leave no DNA, no good description, and painful but not highly visible wounds. That last rule was part of the media theory of crime. Without a good picture that evokes the emotions, there's no story to tell. Without a story, the media doesn't pick up on it, and nobody gives a shit. The crime fades away as if it never happened. The Big Friday approached the same as any other day, but the stress was off the charts. It was all I could do to maintain the outward appearance of normality. I walked into that bar half an hour early expecting to see cops setting up for a sting operation, but there were only a few scattered families eating wings and burgers at various tables. My two co-conspirators sat in the far back section. They too had arrived early. We hunched over and whispered to each other about all that we had learnt over the past few weeks, but we quickly realised that our secretive behaviour just made us look suspicious. Relaxing, we took on the nonchalant manner of the families around us. It was then that Jake said,
"We do Tom's boss first."
I frowned. How did you decide that?
Think about it,
our most determined member explained, looking over at Tom as he spoke.
I'm the angriest of us, clearly. We leave my boss for last, because I'll make sure it happens. Agreed?
We nodded.
Good. Then on that same logic in reverse, Tom's is the meekest of us three.
Tom shrugged sheepishly. I'm still in though.
I know you are, buddy. That still means we flip the logic around. Your boss is first, us two will handle it. Best you don't know the details, except the time you will need an alibi. We'll let you know.
I nodded, but gulped. Jake and I were really going to do this. We paid cash and went our separate ways after exchanging burner phone numbers. Jake had bought an old junker car with cash, and we now used it to drive around Tom's business at intervals to check things out. He told us the man's schedule as it related to work, and we began compiling his other habits. While Jake's intensity subtly put me off, Tom's well-dressed boss wore a perpetual scowl of contempt that primarily engaged me in our plan to teach him a lesson. As we watched through the windows of the building, the man simply oozed prickishness. At times, we actually saw him screaming red-faced at Tom, who just lowered his head and took the abuse. We chose a night 2 days before a holiday party. The party would have been an ideal time to catch a well-dressed prick alone and likely drunk at abnormally late hours, and avoiding the opportunity was exactly how we would divert suspicion away from Tom. If he had been one of the employees, the police would reason. Surely, they would have chosen the more opportune night. I still didn't really believe we were actually going to do it. It was fun owning our own capability for violence in a way society usually forces us to suppress. It was fulfilling in some strange animal way to realize and entertain the fact that we actually had the power to change things directly. All the money and laws in the world couldn't stop a few determined men from exacting justice, and that thought was immensely and strangely freeing. Of course, we weren't really going to do this. The legal system will take everything from us while defending the behavior of well-dressed prick with a fury. But that last night outside Tom's office building, Jake donned his mask and slipped out of the car when the moment came. I freaked. I did slip my mask on too, but I ran after him to stop him. This was an insane idea. And I should have known Jake was angry enough to actually take that deranged step off society's allowed paths. I remember grey hair. That close. The older man had streaks of grey hair I hadn't noticed before. Thing is, he turned and saw two masked men running at him full speed in the night, and he didn't get scared. He just sneered and began to say something condescending. Thinking back on it now, I can see how it might have been a show, false confidence, or his form of bravery. But my inner disgust flared, and I slowed. Jake pushed him hard with gloved hands, and well-dressed prick fell backwards, hit his head on the cement sidewalk, and lay twitching. I asked the horrified obvious.
He can't be dead, can he? Just like that? He is.
Jake breathed. Shit, what do we do? I asked, fighting down panic. We were out of the sight of the two cameras that watched the other side of the building, but we were still exposed to the dark side streets should anyone drive by. The plan had been to hit him a few times, steal his wallet to make it look like a mugging, and then run. Snapping out of shock and back into determination, Jake shook his head.
Nothing.
He pointed down.
He fell and hit his head. There's literally no evidence on him that we even exist.
What if he's not dead? What if he wakes up? A horrible smell wafted up from him as we stood staring down. Jake moved back.
Smell that? He's dead.
He was right. I'd seen it on numerous episodes. The man's bowels had evacuated at the moment of his death. There was nothing to do but get in the car and go. For a time, I lived in agonizing fear that the cops would bust down my door, arrest me, and parade me in front of the entire neighborhood. But Tom reported back to us a week later at a new bar. The death of his boss had been considered a tragic accident, and he himself had been promoted. It had all worked out immensely better than we could have ever hoped. I was ready to be done, honestly. We'd killed a man. No message had been sent. That smug arsehole had never known a moment of fear or regret for his actions. We'd just completely eliminated him. I wondered if he had a family. The basic stress inside me could not be mitigated. I'd never witnessed death firsthand, let alone helped cause it. I could only console myself by believing that any man who treated his employees like he had was probably also abusive towards his family, but there was no real way of knowing that. We'd screwed up and gone way too far. I was going to tell them I was done. It was Jake, though, that grew darker and more determined.
We're all locked into this now,
he said quietly and fiercely, his knuckles white around his beer glass. He looked directly at me.
Your boss is next.
I should have known then what was coming. Having lived my entire life before that point in a sea of politeness and protection, I simply couldn't recognize the face of a true sociopath, even when he was sitting right in front of me. I had the obvious crisis any civilized person might. For days, I agonized over whether to warn my boss that she was about to be brutally assaulted by my partners in crime. Despite numerous rationalizations, excuses, and mental playbacks of the death of well-dressed prick, some part of me knew something would happen this time too. Somehow or another, she would end up dead if the attack went through. It was a premonition I couldn't shake. I downed coffee after coffee while debating what to do. At one time, I had liked and respected her. She'd been incredibly convincing. She's a single mum with 5 kids, and we'd had a drink after my first office Christmas party. In that late private hour, we'd talked like normal people. She told me about her struggles and stress. I'd believed her. That conversation remained with me as an internal excuse for her behavior for the next several years. There were constant requests for unpaid overtime, extra work, or favours. I did all of these with a sense of pride. For what man could refuse a woman in such need? It felt like we were a secret team, like I had a responsibility greater than those my co-workers held. Of course, I felt a little weird when a new intern quit because of all the extra unpaid work. I hadn't seen any of that, and I wondered, was she asking him for favours too? Had it somehow been kept secret from me? My confusion turned to bitter fury when I decided to leave at 9 at night instead of staying until my extra work was done. I didn't go home. I visited a few bars she had mentioned over the years. At the 5th and final one, I found her. I sat in my car and watched through the windows of the place. It was a high-class establishment, and she stood laughing with a few girlfriends, a dainty drink in hand. Her dress was form-fitting and fantastic. This was not at all the tired and stressed single mum had been told. It might have been crossing the line, but I knew her dress from mail at work, and I drove by her place while she was out. The lights were on, and someone was home. I knocked. The door swung open a minute later to reveal a haggard 30-something man and a cluster of screaming and boisterous children. "Can I help you?" he said. "Oh, I'm sorry," I told him. "I was looking for lying bitch. She told me to bring some documents for tomorrow's presentation." "She's not here," he replied with a sigh. "She's at work until late again." I could have told him then, but I didn't think it was my place at the time. Instead, I made polite small talk until the truth came out. These were his kids. He'd been a single father of 5 after their mother had died, and lying bitch was a supposed stable and hard-working new wife that I later noted had come around right after a large life insurance settlement. Once I knew, her lies unraveled daily. After every single claim she made, I dug a little deeper, and I found that she did literally no work in any area of her life. Her dynasty was an invisible pyramid of secret overtime and personal favours. Each man was separated from the others to ensure nobody would ever put 2 and 2 together. Her home life was non-existent. She drank, partied, and went home with strangers under the guise of working late hours to support her new family. And she utterly despised me once I slowly stopped accepting her requests. Rumours began circulating about me at the office, a promotion passed me over, and I kept ending up in the worst projects. She never said a single word to me directly, and the old me with the wool over his eyes would have just chalked it up to bad luck, but I knew this woman was a demon of lies that sucked the life out of everyone around her. But did she deserve to die? I sat at my desk, drinking coffee and going over and over her supposed crimes. Nothing she'd done was illegal in the strictest sense, and I could certainly destroy her life simply by shedding light on her pyramid of lies, but there were consequences to consider. First, that she had no real skills other than manipulation. If her life was torn to shreds, How would she support herself? Would she go through the long and arduous process of self-discovery and learning to stand on her own 2 feet, or would she just spin a new web? Second, she could likely take me down with her. There would be no hiding my identity if I approached multiple people and clued them in. I might even come off as a strange stalker. As the days wore on and Tom and Jake observed her and began putting together a plan, I felt the decision slowly being made for me. If I was to spare her this time, I needed to choose. The day of the planned assault, a direct conversation felt in order. I entered her office with a binder casually in hand. "Hey, lying bitch, mind if we talk?" "Sure," she said, with a smile that I knew to be fake, but which was otherwise perfect. "Sit." I sat. She leaned over slightly forward. "What's up?" Approaching what was really on my mind in a roundabout way, I said, "I noticed I've been sort of stagnating where I'm at. My performance reviews have been very good, so I've been wondering if there's anything else I can do to get back on top." Sighing, she leaned back against her chair and said, "I didn't want to say anything, but you haven't exactly been a team player lately. People are starting to talk about it." Suppressing an inner rush of anger, I put on a politely confused face. "Really? What's the problem? I've done everything officially asked of me." A real workplace is a bit more than official," she explained. "Official projects are just the minimum to get by, and to really be part of the team, you have to take one more than just the minimum." I faked my best understanding nod. "I was doing that my first few years here." "You were," she responded, leaning forward again. "What changed?" I couldn't help it. "When I was working unpaid overtime one night, I went home to get something and I saw your car at a bar. You were in there drinking." To her credit, her face didn't twitch a bit. "What I do in my personal time is none of your business. I hope that's all you did, or I'll have no qualms about informing HR that you're harassing me." "Harassing you?" My anger mixed with amusement. She was an expert predator in the ecosystem in which she had evolved, but I had a secret advantage. Real violence cut through bullshit red tape and pathetic reputation games. "Not at all, lying bitch. I just happen to know what really goes on here. I ran into other guys doing unpaid overtime, which is against company policy, by the way. And I even ran into your husband at the grocery store. Many things you say just don't add up." Her mask finally fell away, and I saw pure evil there. She stood, came around her desk, and stood above me with flared eyes. "Fine. Dispense with the games. What do you want for your silence? Money? A promotion? Sex?" I stared up in disgust. "Seriously?" I stood very slowly and moved towards her door, though my instincts told me leaving without making a deal was an extremely dangerous idea. The kind of person Lion Bitch truly was seemed to run on amoral manipulation and exchanges. She was rather attractive, but something about that option felt objectively wrong. A promotion would have been nice, but that would just have put me deeper under her thumb. "Money." She lifted slightly, relieved in her own special way that I was playing ball. "How much?" she asked. What number seemed reasonable? $10,000. She didn't flinch. Had my number been perfect, or should I have asked for more? Reaching down, she picked up the phone, and I watched as she faked perfect distress for her husband about a sudden financial need. I could hear his confused hurt and despair on the other side of the phone, but he did agree, and she hung up with a smile. "You'll have your money tomorrow. I expect you'll keep your mouth shut." "I will," I said quietly, my decision made. It was my turn to go to the bar. Inviting out a few colleagues from work, we sat, drank, and commiserated over the endless hours working with little reward under Lying Bitch. None outright revealed what she was doing to each of them. I marveled at how well our culture had trained us to be polite and loyal to the point of self-enslavement. These were decent men, good men. They deserved to be free and treated with respect. Fancying myself their secret liberator, for in many ways I was, I soared high on the power of life and death. I was hilarious, compassionate, and the center of attention. I was no longer beat down, frustrated, and stressed. and they could sense it. Determined to make my positivity infectious, I grew ever more boisterous and over the top, and we ended the night by invading a karaoke bar and having the best office outing of all time. We slunk back into our work the next morning exhausted and haggard, for not one of us had gone home. We'd greeted the sunrise at a dinner, ate waffles and pancakes, and headed into the office as a caravan of still drunk fools intent on facing the music together. But the music never came, and neither did Lying Bitch. Around noon, after we'd had ample time to up our coffee and down painkillers, the regional VP arrived with a grief counsellor in tow. It seemed that Lying Bitch had accidentally driven herself over the corner of a nearby bridge on the way home. The VP did not mention that she had been drinking at a bar. It was a tragic accident. The company would make sure to take care of our family, and most importantly, we all had the day off. I drifted home and lay on the couch as the hours blurred together. Part of me was triumphant and grinning unseen, but part of me was horrified that I'd been right. The planned beating had instead ended in death a second time. I wasn't going to meet with Tom and Jake for another 3 weeks, but I knew I would be demanding the full story of what happened from them. How did roughing someone up turn into driving them off a bridge? At the time, I still felt guilt. That gnawing chill compelled me to return to her husband's house, and I stood at the door and offered my condolences. He gravely accepted them, but he also seemed relieved and rested. Behind him, I saw a nanny taking care of the kids, and I understood. Either the company benefits or a second life insurance payout had rescued this family from the hole their embezzling new mother figure had dug underneath them. Free of guilt, I took my leave. Death had not been a tragedy for anyone in that woman's life. Violence had spiked in out of the wilds of human experience with surgical aim, and removed the tumour that had grown on the suffocating structure of rules and customs we'd collectively built in a vain attempt to keep out the dangers of nature. Rather than protection, we had built only a framework for imprisonment and parasites. There was something bigger in what Tom, Jake and I were doing. I had to think on it. The weeks rolled by as I dealt with the intense stress and let it flow out of me. I was given her old job. After that grand night out, the guys universally threw their support behind me to replace her, and the regional VP couldn't give a shit either way. I was in, and I found it strange that twice Death had been rewarded with immediately increased status. The structure we lived in was cold and impersonal to the extreme. Without the need for the staff to secretly and constantly overwork, our office productivity and morale rose significantly. Actually, doing my job made it easier for my men to do theirs. What a concept. By the time my meeting with Tom and Jake approached, I had nothing but contempt for the memory of Lying Bitch. But I still wanted to know what happened. Beers in hand, we sat at the back of a new hole-in-the-wall bar, and Tom explained. Well, we caught her outside and alone as planned, but she managed to rip off both our ski masks. Once she saw our faces, we knew we were in trouble, and she was a vicious biter. One thing led to another, and she got knocked out pretty hard. Jake said we had to get rid of her because she'd seen our faces, and we came up with the plan to drive her off the bridge. We didn't want to do it, but it just got out of hand. It made sense, at least in our already twisted perspectives. Jake simply nodded along to this explanation, his expression neutral. I watched his face as Tom spoke, but not a single reaction evident. At that point, I was really beginning to suspect something darker, but I was still proud of our new strength. It was also our turn to assault Jake's boss. The quiet and calm threat in our companion's eyes brooked no argument. It was up to Tom and I to make it happen, and I honestly thought I would have the chance to make this third attack not end in a murder. I also honestly thought it would be the last. Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. Thank you very much for listening to that. Parts 3 and 4 will go up on Friday the 8th of July 2016, so when that goes up, be sure to check it out. And of course, if you're watching it after that date, then click on the link on the screen and in the description to watch parts 3 and 4. don't forget guys to like the video and share it and comment if you can, it would really help me out. So once again, thanks a lot for listening. Oh, and of course, don't forget to subscribe.